But what we want to get to with Don, how are you doing, first of all?
I'm doing just fine. I may be the only one in the country that's doing just fine because at least Colts and Hoosier country, but I'm doing fine.
Yeah, it's not going well for if you're a fan of either one of those two programs right now. Indiana welcomed in a number 8 Cincinnati team with an excellent opportunity to prove a lot of people wrong and prove a lot of things wrong. And they had nothing but opportunity to do that. And we're not able to get that done, Don, basically.
No, they weren't. It was really a good performance for 27 and a half minutes on Saturday. They played terrific. They jumped out to a 14-0 lead, had a 3rd down and 10 situation where the play was ran. The pass was incomplete. Should have been 4th down and a punting situation for Cincinnati. And Indiana gets a targeting call on their outstanding linebacker, Micah McFadden. And before we go any further with that, they have got to change that rule.
I didn't even know it existed.
Well, it's targeting if you use the crown of your helmet.
The rule. I was talking about, yeah, go ahead. I didn't know they could go back and look at a replay about something else and call a foul like that. But yeah. I interrupted you. I'm sorry. But, yeah, I agree with you on the targeting call. It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to change the rule. And look, I understand safety aspects of but football's football. I mean, guys get shoved into other people, and the crown of the helmet hits the guy and the other guy's helmet. That's not a targeting. That's not a targeting call. And if you looked at it by the very definition of the rule, you could say, yeah, the crown of the helmet hit this kid, his helmet. It's targeting. It's not targeting. If it was targeting, it had to be intentional,
right?
And there could be a personal foul called there if you wanted to. I mean, there are flagrant 1 and flagrant 2 in basketball, right?
Absolutely.
So why can't you have a flagrant 1 or a flagrant 2 at the college level as well? There was no intent on Micah McFadden to spear the guy, to use it or target the guy in any way. It was just a guy shoved in. He was shoved into this quarterback, and his helmet happened to hit the other kid's helmet. That's not targeting. So they've got to change that rule. But that play, that changed the whole dynamic of this football game. And the next thing you see is Cincinnati takes advantage of it. They score a touchdown. Then Indiana does something silly again and give up a field goal in the final seconds. And now it's 14-10. All the momentum is on Cincinnati's side. And from that point on, it was a shootout type of performance. And without Micah McFadden in there, it definitely gave Cincinnati an advantage.
Yeah, the tone absolutely changed, and I agree with you 1,000%. Unbelievable that I did. First of all, I didn't know that they could go back on replay, looking at something else and pull that penalty out. I mean, what's the difference between pulling that out, pulling out illegal use of the hands, unnecessary roughness? I don't know. I didn't know they could go back and do that while looking at something else, but that's another thing. But, yeah, there's no intent whatsoever. Now, had that been just on the other side of the half, he would have had to sit out a half of next week. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, but it's an unbelievably egregious penalty for something completely and totally unintentional that completely changes the tone of a lot of games and a lot of teams, and it's not really it's not fair in any way.
No, again, they've got to change the rule. They've got to look at it, and they've got to do it immediately. But, of course, it won't be done until next year. So
of course.
It's going to continue to be the same thing. Now, maybe
and then I'll come for offensively.
If it happens again in another ball game, and the officials have all talked about it, they may not call that. I mean, this may have changed how they think about it, but unfortunately, at this juncture, it doesn't help Indiana in any way, shape, or form.
No, and I'll be honest, I hadn't seen that. I know that they went to great lengths to call that play for a year or so to make sure to get that into the forethought of players and to try to get them to hitting safer, and I get that. And now they feel like they had gotten there. I have not really seen or heard that penalty called that much, if at all, this year. And to clearly be able to see something that was unintentional and to call that, I don't understand the purpose of it by the officials even now. If you want to go by the absolute rule, I guess, but they're not doing that for every play. So why not put the same a subjectivity there that you do in other places. I don't understand, but that's the way it is. And it definitely changed the course of the outcome of this game.
Well, one other thing about that, every running back in the country uses his helmet. Every single one, because they put that head down, they're driving into the tackler or into the line of scrimmage. They've got the head down. They're using the helmet. I get why they have the rule about targeting, but if that's not targeting, I don't know what is. So again, we can sit here and lament about the rules for the next 1,000 years, but it's not going to change anything until the rule changes.
On the other side of the ball, Fish, Indiana has got to get a more cohesiveness with them. They were able to do some things. The running game was okay, but Stephen Carr, I think, ended up with maybe a 2.5 average per carry early on. Cincinnati made some adjustments. Indiana not able to do and get the red zone. Obviously, the story of the game there. Cincinnati 5 of 5 in the red zone. Indiana had 6 trips and only cashed in 3 times.
Well, there's no doubt that the offensive line is still very much a question mark with this ball club. And I say that not to disparage the offensive line, but we're not seeing the protection for Michael Penix because he's getting chased around a lot. He has to get rid of the ball almost on every play early if he's not going to get chased. They're not opening holes where these guys, I think Tim Baldwin had a really good game on Saturday, with the exception of one play, as we all know, down at the goal line when he fumbled it. It was late in the contest, and I really feel bad for him in that regard because I thought he was the best running back of the two, and I think Stephen Carr is a really good back too. I'm not trying to get him over Baldwin over Stephen Carr, but Baldwin was the more effective of those two running backs on Saturday, in my opinion, and But you just can't. You've got to have some holes where these guys can work and where they can make some plays. And I just don't see them. And I could point out one particular player that I think is really having a struggle at this point, but I'm not going to do that because that would be putting the whole onus on him. But at the same time, as a group, this team is still not blocking the way that they have to block if we're going to be successful.
And what's, I guess, a little befuddling about that, Charlie, to bring you in, is these are veteran guys. And it's just like when you're going onto the court, the expectations, when you have a group of veterans, the expectations are higher. And unfortunately, we're going to have to readjust the expectations for this football team right now. But they're not performing at the level anyone expected. I don't know if expectations are fair for us to put on them, but when they achieve a level like they did last season, we expect to see that again, and especially when you've added a little bit to that, but they haven't. And I don't understand where the disconnect is.
Yeah, I say, when you have a veteran group, there is a high expectation because you're passing on a tradition of what's being done routine-wise, practice, game preparation. Now with the struggles, right, now there's a question mark. So, on a positive side, you get the younger players probably more optimistic to get playing time, right? Because you got to figure something out. I'm not saying, there's a dire straits situation, but you got to figure something out because you're going to now in the Big Ten where it's not going to get easy. You had some opportunities that slipped by. Who knows why? You got a quarterback that's struggling. It is what it is. There's going to be questions, and now you got to think about today's an off day typically, or yesterday would have been an off day for those guys who played Saturday. So now Sunday, film study coaches, right? And what are the players thinking about? Players talk, right? Who's gonna do what? Is now the young quarterback going to get more reps with the first unit? So you got a lot of holes, and you want to figure something out. So you hope you have time, but I don't know how much time you really have to adjust because you got to get some wins under your belt.
Yeah, Don, and of course this week they grab up a game that's I don't want to call it a trap game, but it's a weird game. You go on the road for a non-conference game to a place that you should easily handle, Western Kentucky. they've been scoring a lot of points. I don't fear anything. This defense looked like a defense that could play with about anybody in the country. So I don't have a lot of fear for those guys there. But this is just a game that when you don't have a lot of confidence offensively, it could be a little dangerous sometimes.
Well, there's no question, but it's not. There's no way this is a trap game. Because if Indiana is not ready to play this game and win this football game, there is no trap here at all, because right now this football team desperately needs a victory. They've lost to two highly regarded football teams. Obviously, Iowa's been in the top 10 now. Cincinnati is certainly still there at number 8 last week, and they won't move down. I can't conceive that they would move down after beating Indiana. There is little doubt that they've played two really good football teams, and they've lost to both of them, and that's disappointing. It's more disappointing, however, the way Indiana has lost. The mistakes, the lack of execution, the quarterback play, the offensive line play, and Saturday, in some respects, you could blame the Indiana defense a little bit too, because the Indiana defense didn't perform as they needed to a couple of times in that second half. They certainly did up until halftime, or just 2.5 minutes before halftime. But after Michael went out, they weren't the same defense either. So there is no way that you can look at this game with Western Kentucky as a trap game. This game is a must-win game for this Indiana football team.
Absolutely. I know you've got the Coach's Show again coming up this Wednesday at 7:05 at Southern Stone Restaurant with Coach.
Yep, Coach Allen and I will have our discussion on. It'll be interesting to see how he handles all that. And we must mention that in the post game on Saturday, he talked about Penix having to go through some kind of a situation in regard to X-rays. I don't know. At one point, we saw Penix holding the elbow in this contest. At another point, he was holding his right hand, I think it was. So I don't know what the X-rays were all about. We'll get the determination on that at the press conference today. But the other question is, how big a leash do you have on Michael Penix at this point? When do you give the next guy up the chance if he continues to make these decision-making mistakes as much as throwing mistakes in the game? Because it's the decision-making to me that has bothered me more than anything else at this point. And that just tells you that Michael's head isn't where it has been in the past in regard to his executing plays or seeing the field, all those kinds of things. So at some point, Mike's performance has to change pretty dramatically if this Indiana football team is to be the team that everybody thinks they can be.
Yeah, the 6 picks thrown in 2 games, really, and a lot of those were forced errors that Don is talking about there. And then so a lot of people have wanted to see Jack Tuttle, which I did not think that we would talking about a quarterback situation, especially 3 games into this season. But we are, and we'll see you next week, Don, and we'll see you at the Coach's Show. I wish you a great rest of your week. Actually, I'll see you at the press conference in about 2 hours.
We'll see you guys then. See you. Thanks, Charlie.